I'm Anthony Dunkerley, a former UK detective, now international advisor investigating human trafficking and people smuggling. I've spent years travelling the world, from conflict zones to corporate boardrooms, meeting the people on the front line of modern slavery. But now, the story comes home. I'm coming back to the UK. Because modern slavery isn't just happening out there, it's happening here, in our communities, our workplaces, and our everyday lives. Away from the headlines and policy debates, these are the moments that matter most. Real people, real work, real conversations. And the moments that keep them human. The small victories, the shared humour, and the strength to show up again tomorrow. This is the Let's Talk Modern Slavery podcast with me, Anthony Dunkerley. Subscribe now and be a part of the conversation. Coming up in this week's episode of Let's Talk Modern Slavery.
The vulnerabilities of being a woman or a girl in the UK today, there isn't a safe space. You can't walk through a park, you can't go to a club, you can't go to work, you can't be at home without the potential of violence. I just want women and girls to be treated equally and to have a life of freedom without abuse.
Red, thank you so much for offering your time today. We're here at the Bowtree Hotel in London. You're someone that I've been trying to pin down for a long time for this interview, but we're finally here, which is great. Contrary to what you would expect in the UK at this time of year, the sun's out and there's no curtains that we can close in this room, which is actually, it's nice, but obviously the lighting and stuff. But again, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
You've done so many things in your life around the human rights issue and in different countries and everything. And I think it would be unfair for me to try and introduce you. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us your story. And how did you get into what you do?
Well, first of all, yes, the sun is shining, which is totally un-British in December. So first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to just kind of share my thoughts and my journey. I'm an accidental humanitarian. I genuinely am. I started off in the UK as an art director and then ended up overseas and walked into the American Red Cross office in Santa Monica and said, my children have just gone to school, can I come volunteer? And very quickly I got picked up as an employee and then ended up in disaster services, which means I've been on the ground for hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires, floods. But what has been a part of my core from a child is I was born a feminist, genuinely born a feminist.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think my version of feminism is the true human rights space around, I just want women and girls to be treated equally and to have a life of freedom without abuse and be recognised in the eyes of the law. So that has always been in the background for me. I am quite competitive, so I did play on the boys' cricket team when I was growing up, so there's this kind of mix in there somewhere. But I genuinely am very passionate about making sure that abuse and violations of women and girls has to be addressed at a global level rather than an individual, regional, country level, because we're in an environment and a space today where rights that I've seen come forward for women and girls are now regressing. So my history has been, I'm currently the chief exec of Rape Crisis South London, and we work with children as young as 4 that have been raped and sexually abused, all the way up to women in their 70s. It's a mechanism that will never not be needed. It's not like we're going to say that we will eradicate rape and sexual abuse completely, ever. Before that, I actually was at Thomson Reuters Foundation working in the ESG space around human rights in supply chains. Yeah. So there's a theme here in that work. Yeah. And before that, I was the former chief exec of Sophie Hayes Foundation, a charity that was founded by a young white British woman who was trafficked to Italy by her boyfriend.
Yeah.
Prior to that, career in the States, very much focused on support for individuals and communities where violations and abuse was prevalent. Yeah. So that's my potted history with a bit of cricket thrown in there.
Yeah, we were talking about that before, weren't we?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many ways and places I could dive in. I mean, it's a whole lifetime of career in this space, and I think maybe just taking it back to the start. So you're in the States and you've got involved in the sort of disaster relief kind of world through Red Cross. May I ask, were there things that you saw that you couldn't unsee? Was that the start of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And from that, you said you're born a feminist.
Yeah.
And I think it's always good to apply a definition, because sometimes people have different interpretations and perceptions. So what's your definition of feminism, and how has that dictated and guided your work?
I grew up in a culture where women are not always afforded equal rights. A culture of forced marriage, a culture of the firstborn, your son is, the person that will continue the lineage forward. And for me, that was always a struggle. I just didn't understand why I could not just be me and have the same rights and the same opportunities as male relatives. And that really was the beginning of the question why. Why am I being treated differently? Yeah. Why am I not allowed to do certain things purely because I was born a female? Yeah. So for me, feminism is literally around the ability to be treated equally, to be afforded equal rights, to be accepted as a female, and then to be treated no differently depending on race, culture, ethnicity, and everything.
Yeah. Did you, forgive me, I'm prying into your family and early life, but did you have older male siblings or anything like that?
I'm
Did
the
you see
eldest.
this disparity within, or younger?
I am the eldest.
Oh, you are the eldest.
I am
within
the
the
eldest.
household with that
Yes,
disparity.
And I love my brother dearly. Cool. But I've always struggled with that question of why is the chosen path? And things have changed. They are changing. But I always struggled with that. Why is my path set before me to become, a wife and a mother if I choose not to? Yeah. Yeah. Ironically, I am a wife and a mother, but it's been at my pace and it's been of my choosing. Yeah. So I think I struggled with that, what the predetermined path that's laid out for women and girls, where they don't always have a say.
When you got into the disaster relief, did you see what you'd felt and saw and interpreted and perceived in that? Was it exasperated in the disaster relief world? Women and young girls feeling or being exploited more than, or did it?
They are more vulnerable.
More vulnerable. Yeah. More vulnerability. And what did that look like?
So when you run relief operations and you have from hundreds to thousands in mega shelters, the abuses are there. They will always be there. And women and girls are extremely vulnerable in those positions. So if you have been made to leave your home because there is an incoming hurricane or there is a wildfire, you are being uprooted from the safety of your home into a mega environment where you are surrounded by strangers. Yeah. And that then leads the vulnerabilities to being exploited and the abuse and stuff like that. Yeah. So I was always conscious of a heightened sense of vulnerability for women and girls when they're put in these situations. You see an awful lot on the ground that you question. But you also, on the flip side, you see the best of humanity as well. I have memories of different relief operations where I still remember the communities and the individuals across those relief operations that made it all worthwhile.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that you have to hang on to, because in an environment which is so chaotic and so difficult and so fluid, it's very easy to get sucked into the world's going to end scenario.
Yeah.
But having that space of people being vulnerable but being open and caring is the thing that keeps you going.
That
and
sustains you through it.
Yeah, it's the sheer gratitude of being able to work with communities that you will never see again, but in some shape or form being able to provide cots and blankets or food or whatever the need was is enough to make you go, you know, we're okay as a society, as humanity.
So you're there, and I guess that's where you sort of first cut your teeth in that world, and learning that skill set and those things that develop. What did you take from that into the next step?
The things that I learned in that environment are that I am actually very good in chaos, which I didn't realize I was.
Yeah.
So it's that ability to just separate the noise out and be focused on the outcome, and be very, very flexible. Almost the kind of flexibility that before you've even verbalized the plan has changed.
Yeah.
That kind of flexibility.
A constant dynamic environment.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I learned from myself that I do have that ability to be very strategic and see the bigger picture, but also be very operational and understand if a particular strategy is being put into place, I can already see how it's going to be implemented and what the challenges will be operationally. So those were things that I very much learned in that environment, and it has sustained me moving forwards, especially as the world seems to be picking up pace with so many issues. So the ability to just navigate chaos and kind of coordinate. I tend to refer to myself, and even my new staff know, I tend to refer to myself as the bus driver.
Yep.
I'm just making sure that everybody gets to the destination all safe and in one piece, and we get to the destination. Yeah.
I guess that's a skill that not many people ever get the opportunity to learn if they have it.
Yeah.
Because being, voluntarily going into that chaos to see, most people don't do it.
Yeah.
You've been involved in that world, and it goes to an organisation at one point, the Sophie Hayes, which you mentioned, which is a well-known organisation that deals with anti-trafficking efforts, particularly around women and children. What steered you towards the anti-trafficking side of things? There's so many different ways it could have gone with preventing exploitation, but it went to trafficking. Where did it?
It actually went to trafficking earlier than that. Right. I came back to the UK and ended up working with Safe Passage and with a group of INGOs around the Calais jungle, and was part of that team that worked with the Home Office to do the closure of Calais jungle. And in that year, what became very evident was that the buying and selling of people was prevalent. We did site visits to Greece, we did site visits to Rome. We literally did a whole load of different site visits to the unofficial refugee camps. And what was clearly evident, once again, was the absolute vulnerability of the women and girls. I mean, they were and are literally commodities. And that's what I'd seen it in smaller doses working in relief, but in that environment, the sheer desperation of people moving continents, not because it was a fun thing to do, but it was a necessity to live, then being further exploited. And it really honed in for me the fact that these issues cannot be treated in isolation. They are all connected. And this was back in 2015, 2016, 2017. Migration, routes of migration, the work with UNHCR, it all needs to link up. It all has to link up. So within that space, two things became evident. If you are a woman or girl and you're being trafficked out of your country into a different country, there is an expectation that if you manage to escape, you're actually not free. Because you are never truly free unless you are independent. If you have no independence, you are not free.
Yeah.
And it was plainly evident, especially in the jungle, that there were groups of women that even if they had managed to get to freedom, they were in an environment which was not their own. They had a language that was not their own. There was a culture there that was not their own. And they were bringing to the table the fact that they were being trafficked. So to expect them to pick up their lives and suddenly become normal functioning human beings is a huge assumption.
Yeah.
And that became more and more evident.
Yeah. Did you see that again because we're talking about, the subjugation of women through lack of access,
Yeah.
rights, etc. And that just transcends every aspect of everything.
Yeah.
So, you've got men that are being trafficked, but even if they are rescued, their rights are still available to them, access to this,
Exactly.
to work, to things like this, whereas even when a woman or a young girl is rescued, they continue. That exploitation as such continues, maybe not manifested by being forced
Yeah.
to do something, but in many ways, maybe still forced to do things, but the nature of the exploitation changed through to societal norms and
So,
that kind of thing.
so if you pull that a little bit further away, you're a young girl from Nigeria or Syria. Culturally, you potentially have not completed grade school. Culturally, there are no expectations of you other than being a wife or a mother or a worker. By being moved continent, or by being moved to another country, you somehow manage to escape your trafficker. How are you going to fight generations of cultural DNA that has told you you technically have no rights? No rights to education, no rights to, even if you work, the salary you bring home is not yours. It's the family's, it's the husband's. So by moving somebody to a different country, and I think there's a bigger conversation around the topic of modern slavery and trafficking, and it has to be broken into trafficking and modern slavery within the country that you grow up in against a country that you have been taken to.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Because those are two very different approaches that you would need to understand where that person's journey actually started from.
Yeah.
And we tend to lump it all as one thing.
Certainly. I mean, you got me, the juice is flowing now, thinking of, then you sort of take it out of just gender and you look at people of colour or any other religion.
Colour, culture, ethnicity.
And layer upon layer of subjugation that makes it more and more complicated, doesn't it?
So if you then add the other complication to that of a member of the LGBTQ community being trafficked to a culture that's not, to an environment that's not theirs, it is this one single lens that seems to get applied to this conversation needs to be pulled apart.
Yeah.
Because every individual is not a widget. They have generations of DNA behind them, and they have culture, ethnicity, religion, caste in their current environment.
Yeah. Well, I guess, is that so if a government has a system in place for identifying, and it's almost like a one
size fits all.
One size fits all. Thank you.
Yes.
One size fits all.
Yes.
But because it's so complicated and nuanced, these are individuals with their own history and stories and everything else that comes with it, from where they're from, their culturalisation, everything. To put them in all the same pot, to ask the same questions, and then either yes or no, you're going to get, you're going to get services, accommodation, etc., or not. Like you're saying, I think it's dramatically oversimplified.
Yes.
What should be done for the larger conversation and those individuals. I guess.
So here's an example of, and some of the teams I've worked with have heard me use this analogy a lot. The Mrs. Smith that we're supporting at Red Crisis South London is the same Mrs. Smith that may be being supported by an anti-trafficking charity.
Yeah.
But those dots are not being connected.
They're not talk. There's no, yeah.
So this is where having almost like a multidisciplinary approach to say there are very good organisations that have part of a victim's journey, but no one organisation has the entire journey, because victims' needs are very different. Immediate needs for any victim is safety, security, all of what we would call immediate needs. They then go into a period of, it's almost a little bit like shock, of not knowing what to do next. So there's that period. The third period then becomes a case of starting to reflect on what the future could look like. The fourth period is working towards how to get to that future. No one organisation can hold that entire journey.
I'm going to ask a sneaky question now.
Okay.
Based on that, do you find that there are organisations that do claim to offer the 360 service? And that if that is the case, is that actually preventing the provision of the full care to people who are identified as victims of modern slavery? Human rights violations don't just live in headlines.
9 men were trafficked from the Czech Republic and forced to work at a UK McDonald's restaurant by a criminal gang.
They live in your supply chain. If your business isn't ready to detect them, you're exposing yourself reputationally, financially, and even legally. The Risk Ready series helps you get ahead of that. I'm Tony Dunkley, a former UK detective and international advisor on investigating human trafficking. I've worked around the world, from Africa to the Middle East, and I want to help you and your business become risk ready. The Risk Ready series is a 6-part live online training experience. It's packed with real-world cases, editable e-workbooks, and tools you can use straight away. If you work in procurement, HR, ESG, legal, or compliance, this training gives you the tools and confidence to act. Legislation is tightening. Supply chain scrutiny is rising. The question is not if, it's when. And when it comes, will you be ready? Join me live for the Risk Ready series on investigating human rights violations in supply chains. Sign up now. Take your team from vulnerable to risk ready.
The best ones that I've seen and worked with also recognise the fact that they cannot hold all of the knowledge. So they're very good at working with community partners. So if you're an individual, and I'm just picking on, say, India, if you're in a community that understands the caste system, good organisations that I know will actively seek those community groups to say, help us better understand this so we can build a robust service system. It gets complicated when it comes to data. That's where some of the hurdles are. having a centralized, almost like a centralized data system, so that all service providers can access Mrs. Smith's records. But then you end up with the whole question of whose data is it, who owns it, and where are the releases. So I do understand it is actually quite complicated.
If you've got people coming through that system, like let's say the UK, the National Referral Mechanism, UK's system for identifying and provision of services for those who are identified as victims, if they're going through that system, is there currently a way of those different organisations becoming aware of individuals that perhaps need special assistance or a particular reflection because of their culture? I'm thinking of like the Nigerian context. I'm well aware there's an organisation that deals specifically with Nigerians and so on. So if we don't have a centralised system, management system, we can't access that data for reasons you mentioned and others. What currently is there in place? How is it done? Is it ad hoc? Is it?
I think it's driven very much case by case.
Right.
The irony of this is, yesterday, I was brought into a meeting with a couple of my staff. There'd been a safeguarding concern with a young child who has been sexually abused, and she's going through some support from us. But what came through from the casework is that we've potentially identified that she's being groomed as well at the same time. So what that will require is my staff reaching out to some of the partners in the trafficking space to be able to join forces to understand how best to support the family and the individual. I think it's happening more as a relationship space than it is an actual system space.
Yeah, and the system will be improved if it moves to that where there's a system in place.
Yeah, I think everything can be improved. And I do understand that there is the flip side of data and information. The world in general is a hostile environment. Othering others is commonplace. It is hostile. So if you are an individual that's been trafficked to the UK and you've genuinely been trafficked, the chances of you coming forward to have your details entered into a government system where the chances of you being provided legal right to remain, it's a roll of the dice. Yeah. And if you are found to not be eligible to stay, you're now in the system as somebody that needs to be removed. Clients and victims, I know, are highly reluctant in this hostile environment to come forward for assistance because they don't know where their information is going to end up. And we had that, in fairness, in the States working relief operations. There was one relief operations where somebody had put out a message to say that ICE were going to come through the shelter. Technically, they can't. They don't have the legal right to. But that emptied that shelter very quickly. And people would rather have faced the disaster than have their name in a system which becomes government-owned. So the question about data and information, I think, is a much bigger conversation that hasn't been addressed.
And just for clarification, ICE there is the American Immigration Control. So taking all of this, your experience is just profound, and then coming through all the way to your role now. When we hear human trafficking, sexual exploitation,
can I just clarify?
Of course, yeah.
Sexual exploitation, human trafficking for sexual exploitation is rape.
And that's where I was bringing it to Rape Crisis London.
It's
the two together. Yeah.
If you are being sexually exploited as a modern-day slave for human trafficking, you are not giving your consent to that sexual act. You are technically being raped. But the irony of it is we don't put it in that context.
Why is that, do you think?
How long do we have?
As long as you need.
So here's an example, and ironically today, Giselle Pellicote's verdict came in. All 50 men were found guilty. Her husband was found guilty of drugging her and having 40 plus men rape her over 40 years. It's estimated she was violated 20,000 times. Now, if the man that did that only got 20 years in his sentence for an abuse of rape that happened for 40 years, there's a question there as to how seriously rape is taken as an act of violation against somebody's human rights.
Yeah. And to give some context again, that's the case that came out with in France, wasn't it, today? Yeah. And thank goodness that conviction did come through. And
yeah.
Do you think it'll send much of a message?
No. Because the defense tried to actually argue that she gave her consent to being drugged and abused.
Drawing,
so let me just add into that. There's rape in a marriage. It was only made illegal in 1991.
In the UK?
In the UK.
Wow.
But a study was done a few years ago where a quarter of the British folks that were polled, a quarter of the population didn't believe that non-consensual sex in a marriage is rape. So there's something about the act of rape which doesn't seem to be hard and fast. It doesn't seem to be solid. Whereas human trafficking and modern slavery, that's a bad thing. Yeah. That's terrible. But when we talk about forced marriage, those people are not giving their consent to being married. So therefore, every time they are being made to have sex, they are not consenting, which means they are being raped.
Yeah, I mean, now you're saying it sounds so obvious. You know, you're saying it out loud. I mean, you know, when I was a cop and the cops I still speak to, and deal with this space, you know, if they're looking at an offence of forced marriage in the UK, which is criminalised, I've never heard of them adding on.
There was no consent.
Of rape every time that sexual intercourse rape took place. You know, but yeah, if there was sexual intercourse, well, that would have been rape because the consent wasn't there initially to marry. Yeah,
especially when it's a child. Yeah. Forced marriage in a child, yeah. They are not consenting. But we're not, and I'm not saying in forced marriages, every time there is a sexual act, it is rape. But you have to start from the premise they did not consent to being married. Yeah. And Giselle did not consent to being drugged and violated. And the women and girls that are trafficked did not give consent to being sexually exploited. So it's rape. Yeah. And somehow we've got to change that narrative. Rape and trafficking and modern slavery are all part of the same conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I bring it to, you know, talking about rape there with your current role?
Yeah.
Being this, you know, the CEO, the leader, driving the bus with the team, making sure they get there.
Yeah.
You'll be seeing, you know, younger people doing the role that you used to do, frontline, there with them. Can you see yourself of how you were in them, or has things changed a lot? Is there a lot more? I guess probably the better question would be: have you seen things change in terms of women feeling more empowered, and that in turn impacts how they tackle an issue like human trafficking, or you just haven't seen that, or it's gone back?
I never thought I would live to see Roe versus Wade.
Right. I
never thought that would happen. To actually be informed that as a woman you have no rights to your body just seems, you know, it just, even now I find it hard to talk about. To see the rise of social media and the normalisation of abuse, women and girls, the rise of certain people in the media that have been accused of trafficking.
Yeah.
The normalisation of that kind of behaviour for young boys, I never thought I would see that.
So you're there steering the bus
Yes.
for the rape crisis South London, and you've got these new younger people coming through as the frontliners, you know, the role that you used to have and over time, and now you're steering the ship. Are you seeing young, particularly women, coming through and feeling more empowered than you can recall at the time of where you were, or has nothing changed? Are we not getting anywhere with this as a society?
Yeah. So the answer to that, unfortunately, is yes and no. At Rape Crisis South London, I'm incredibly proud of our staff. We have over 100 staff, and the staff bring all walks of life, experiences, age groups, ethnicities, cultures. We have what I would call a really passionate group of youngsters,
Yep.
whatever the definition of youngsters is today. I think with me, it's just they have more energy than I do. But they're incredibly committed and passionate. And I think part of that relates to the fact that they can see things are going sideways. So they can see things like Roe versus Wade. They can see the rise in numbers of survivors. There are waiting lists for years for survivors and victims to get support. So they see that. They see all of the challenges, which almost emboldens them. And they are, I mean, honestly, they are the most passionate group of young women that I've ever worked with. Yeah. I think the difference from when I was coming through was it's almost like we were on the uptick. So we were seeing rights coming through. I spent time at UN Women UK as a trustee. There was a sense of hope, and there was a sense of a movement moving forward. So we were being heard. It's almost like we're on the downslide of that, which is in some ways empowering and instilling a deeper sense of fighting the fight. So it's a different, the spaces and times are completely different. The no side of it is there is so much around the vulnerabilities of being a woman or a girl in the UK today. There isn't a safe space. You can't walk through a park, you can't go to a club, you can't go to work, you can't be at home without the potential of violence. So I think it is complicated. Will it always stay like this? No. We will always get to a point where some of these rights that are being removed will be fought and brought back to the table. I think the difference now compared to when I was the youngster is there is a greater understanding of diversity, not having a one-size-fits-all approach, because these are young women. In one of our teams, we've got an amazing mix of backgrounds. So they bring that with them. Does it mean that they always, if you are slightly different, are you treated equally so you have the opportunity to have a seat at that table? That's still a problem. That is still a problem. But I think we're slightly more aware that it is a problem and we need to fix it. I don't know, when I was coming through, whether we would have even discussed this.
Do you draw strength from the yes?
Yes.
Or does the no outweigh all of the efforts and the time and the movement to try and bring more, equity, understanding women?
Yeah. The option of a no is not there. It just isn't. I don't have any daughters. I have a house full of men. the option of a no is just not even part of my DNA. I have nieces. I have friends who have daughters. I have friends who have sons who are concerned about this. So no, it will, everything is swings and roundabouts. We'll go as far as Roe versus Wade, and at some point it will come back the other way. If we say no is an option, what we're actually saying is we're accepting that women and girls do not have the fundamental UN principles of equality, a life of freedom without violence. And I don't believe that, and I don't think a large portion of the world doesn't believe that. The problem is the scale at which sexual exploitation, forced marriage, rape, all of those areas, yes, they're increasing. They're also more visible because of the day that we live in and the age that we live in, where we have instant access to everything, which we didn't have 30 years ago. But that doesn't mean to say these things didn't happen then at the same scale. It's just we have the information. What is disturbing and what I do find hard to reconcile is even in the day and age of media, social media, access to information, we still have cases like Giselle Pellicotte, and people are shocked. So we have these brilliant tools to be better informed, but coming to the table to be informed, there is a whole world of misinformation out there, and it's getting harder and harder to fight the cause when this misinformation is out there at the same time.
What do you think is the way forward? How can we get it back to what it was in terms of, right, it's getting better,
Yeah.
we're on the up? I mean, I'm sure it's a complicated, multi-layered, faceted issue, but
actions have to have consequences. To be given a 20-year sentence for abusing your wife for 40 years is not a good consequence. There are cases, I mean, all of last year, there were cases where a victim to decide to go down the legal road of trying to get justice, trying to get a prosecution, as you've seen with CPS last week, it's taking longer and longer and longer, and victims, male and female, are walking away from that particular avenue because there's no guaranteed outcome. It takes up years and years of your life. It's very intrusive. You have to, quite frankly, prove that you were a victim. Therefore, that has to change. And that's what I said right at the beginning. With the UN principles, it's that right to be recognized legally. And if you're not being recognized legally, there's no outcome there that would ever be suitable. So we have to change that. The action has to have appropriate consequences to it. And it shouldn't take years and years and years, because what you're doing is, if you're a victim of trafficking or modern-day slavery, or you are being abused domestically, your life is on hold. And that's if you've been brave enough to even make the decision to go and report it in the first place. So there's that side of it. There's a desperate need for that first intervention with the police and with what I would call the legal space to better understand what it has taken that individual to walk through that door and what their needs are going to be walked through it. And we have that through our, we have staff in the ISFAs, and they help hold that space for any client that decides to walk through what I would call the prosecution door. We've got clients that have been waiting 4 years. and if these cases don't go to court, they're going to back out. So with everything that's going on, with misinformation, with appropriate action taken in the court system, if we don't have that, it is like the Wild West. The abuser, the trafficker, there are no consequences for them.
And without the consequence, without setting the precedent
Exactly.
that this is what will happen, the deterrence is dramatically reduced.
Yeah.
And obviously will carry on. Yeah. Because you've been in this space for so long, dealing with these kind of things, and this is something I ask all the guests that I speak to, is how do you manage your mental health, or even how have you dealt with it before, and perhaps has that changed over time?
It has absolutely changed. When I started out in my career, it was the Neanderthal age where there was no social media. There was no Google. It was much easier in a mental health space to switch off. It was easier to go home from a job and just be with family and do what I would call normal things. The rise of the digital space has meant that you are constantly immersed in information that is on the periphery or directly related to what you do. So and you don't realize that you're almost like feeding the beast there. The more you read it, the more you read it, the more you read it, and your mental health absolutely tanks. So I made the decision a couple of years ago. I've really reduced what I read, and I have periods where I actually opt right out of anything digital.
Yeah.
Other than, and it's not, yes, I do some of them, but it's not pictures of cats. It's usually pictures of dogs. But there was a direct correlation between my mental health and what I was reading online.
You felt the results.
Oh, I found myself being sad all the time. And it was hard to figure out, and my family picked up on it and everything. And I realized that it was directly related to the fact that I was online more than I should be, and it was okay for me to opt out. Yeah. But it was hard giving myself permission to opt out. Yeah. So now it's a hard stop. I just don't need to read it. If I see the headline and I suspect it's not good for me, I will not read it. But I actually now have periods where I do no digital at all.
And you found that that's really something that's helped longer term for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because otherwise, when you work in any of the humanitarian spaces, whether you're in relief operations or whether you're in modern slavery or whether you're in domestic abuse or rape and sexual violence, you're dealing with people in absolute crisis points of their lives, and you do absorb some of that. Yeah. You do. I can visualize people that I've worked with, victims. I can still see their faces. You just have to accept that at some point you need to be able to step away from it mentally. And it's not because you don't care. You're just protecting yourself so that you can be available and ready tomorrow to keep supporting. So a detox on digital is the thing that I found works.
Red, once again, thank you so much for your time and everything that you've done and continue to do so. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.